What's going on, Bears fans? It's another episode of Draft on Tap here. Your boy AC and my man Danny Shimon in here to talk about some draft prospects. Maybe we'll talk a little free agency and some news and notes that are going on around our Chicago Bears. But first and foremost, how you doing, my man? How's it been?
I'm doing great. Just digging in more into this the tape here, getting to know more of these prospects more and more. And then just kind of going through and seeing, what's been happening here with free agency in terms of, are the Bears fulfilling some needs? Are they able to resign some of their guys? Are they losing players in position that, we didn't expect, AKA, Drew Dahlman. That's why, you and I, we talked about the show, coming on this season, we didn't anticipate having a show dedicated to centers. We thought we had the interior offensive line good, but then obviously the surprise retirement of Drew Dahlman. And lo and behold, the Bears did go out and get Garrett Bradbury, who I don't know if you saw his opening, media session via Zoom. Very, very, very impressive young man. Very intelligent, which obviously kind of follows everything that you heard about him. In terms of smart, dedicated, athletic. So, but he's a placeholder for me. I think the Bears have earmarked a center probably or one or two maybe, not that they're going to draft you, but they've kind of focused in on a couple of prospects, and they're probably going to utilize one of these picks here. Either pick, in my opinion, it's either going to be pick 60 or pick 89 in the third round is where I'm going to target and get one. Yeah, because for me, like going through, and again, I haven't gone through the entire center group. I went about 10 or 15 of them. And I found the five that I feel fit, scheme wise for the Bears. And in terms of, scheme wise, I'm talking about a guy that can do, a lot of zones read stuff. So you got to be athletic. You got to have good feet. You got to be able to move in space. You have to be able to elevate and get to the next level defender. But also, because you saw a lot of times that, they did also mix in some power, gap scheme stuff. So you'll be able to get out and pull and lead. Also, if you have traps and all that stuff. So you got to be a flexible player, but predominantly they want athletic centers. And, Dahlman and also, Bradbury, they fit that mold. And I've picked my top five for now, as of today, that I'd see targets for the Bears. And then, we can then move on forward in terms of seeing what else, the draft has to offer. But for me, center is a deep position. You can probably get a guy in the fourth round. But if you're targeting someone that's going to be the future of your offensive line in the middle there, with Caleb and hopefully going with Caleb, I'd say pick 60 or pick 89 might be the way to go. Again, it all depends on how the board falls, what other teams are doing around them, and also something that you and I have discussed briefly, but something that we don't know is what do they think, they being the coaching staff, of Luke Newman, right? Yeah. Rookie last year came in. We saw him play some guard, had been playing some, take some snaps at center in training camp. And also, I believe he got into center, if I'm not mistaken, in some of the preseason games. But, that's a guy that I was very impressed with last year. A college left tackle, kicked inside the guard, could potentially be a center. So I think this will tell us as well. If they go through the first, 3 or 4 rounds and don't pick a center, that tells me a lot about what they feel about Luke Newman moving forward. So, but as of today, what is it today? The 16th of March, I think they are going to draft a center, and one of these 5 guys that I've earmarked, I think will be possibly one of those guys.
Yeah, and I agree with Jay Grizz here, where he says I trust Ben more than I do Poles, especially when it comes to offense. I mean, we saw how he came in and revamped the offensive line last year, like you said, trading for Tooney and trading for Jackson and bringing in Drew Dahlman and Darnell Wright really stepped into his own this year too and became a second team All-Pro, I believe it was. So yeah,
he was challenged. Darnell Wright was challenged. He's got a coaching staff. He's got an offensive line coach on, Dan Roshar, that challenged him and said, and Ben Johnson challenged him early on, and we saw the best out of Darnell Wright. And remember, Darnell Wright played with an injury for most of that season, right? So he wasn't 100% healthy throughout the year. I don't think he needs surgery. I haven't heard anything about him needing surgery, but that just shows coaching matters, right? Coaching staff matters. And yes, you're right. And Poles I don't trust, but in Ben Johnson and his staff I do trust. We saw multiple draft classes of Ryan Poles. None of them had the impact that last year's class had. And what was the difference? The difference was Ben Johnson and his staff got in there and they dictated to Poles what kind of players they want. And when then, Poles and his staff, they went and they kind of identified some of the players that they're talking about. And then when it came to, down to the nitty gritty, if Ben Johnson doesn't sign off on a player, that player is not going to be drafted by the Chicago Bears. So, but yeah, so, and we saw the production that the rookie class had last year for the Bears. So that's why moving forward, I expect the same thing to happen here. And I expect them, especially though, they've been so relatively quiet, I should say, in free agency, that I think they're going to do a big, emphasis on draft class and filling a lot of these needs via the draft.
Yeah. Well, before we get too deep into the draft, the second wave of free agency came through and we watched our secondary pretty much all leave via free agency. The big one was Kevin Byard. We talked about last week how we wanted to see him teamed up with Kobe Bryant in our defensive backfield. He gets a 1-year, $9 million deal with the New England Patriots. CJ Gardner-Johnson gets a 1-year, I believe, $6 million deal with the Buffalo Bills. Jaquan Brisker gets a 1-year, $5.5 million deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Nashawn Wright gets a 1-year, $5.5 million deal with the New York Jets. What are your thoughts, Danny?
Yeah, of all those guys that left, I'm not shedding tears for any of them except for Kevin Byard. I think Kevin Byard really, I think was someone I was really hoping that they would re-sign, not only because of, he led the NFL last year with 7 interceptions. He's also, he's still a ball hawking safety. He's had, I believe the stat I saw was six or more seasons of, 6 seasons of 4+ interceptions in his career, Kevin Byard. So this guy is still productive, still making plays on the ball. And it was a modest 1-year, $9 million deal that ended up going with to New England, reunited with Mike Vrabel, who obviously was his coach with the Titans. So that one hurt. That one was one I was hoping that he'd come back because, again, not just the production, but the leadership that Kevin Byard had on that team. I think that was key, and I think that's going to be missed. Now, I understand that every year it's a new team and new leaders come up and grow and develop and new voices, raise up in the locker room. But he was one I would love to see him to, come back. But everyone else, guys, the NFL is telling us what they thought about the Bears secondary last year. None of them parlayed those, those good seasons into multi-year contracts, right? Nashawn Wright was the first one, made the Pro Bowl, right? I believe it was a Pro Bowl alternate, if I'm not mistaken. Had 5 interceptions. He doesn't get a multi-year contract. He goes for a 1-year deal. Right. Same thing with CJ. CJ came in as a filler. I think he did an admirable job coming in late in the season and giving them a presence there on defense. But again, he's someone that we saw towards tail end, the season with, especially the matchup against Green Bay and some of the games against the Rams. His speed is not there, right? So, and then the Bears were emphasizing that they want speed and youth on defense. And, so basically I've been saying this all last year when if you guys watched me on B55 and Before 55, I said, Dennis Allen's doing what he can with what he has this year, meaning this past season. So now he's got a chance to get in there and kind of bring in some of the guys he's looking at. And we're seeing aggressive young players like a Kobe Bryant, Bush, the linebacker, and, obviously DeMarco Jackson, he had a relationship with New Orleans, came in last year. We saw, he's got an aggressive temperament when he plays the game of football as well. So talking about speed, talking about aggressive, physical brand of football. And when I say that, then I understand why Kevin Byard might not have matched Kevin Byard, or there was a range in terms of where they would have matched him, because, he's going to be 33 next year. And, he's not the fastest anymore. So I think, he may have lost a step there, but for me, just that leadership, I think what he provided in that secondary, in the locker room, I think it would have been something that, for me at least, worthwhile to bring him back on a 1-year modest deal, and just, and then you can still draft a guy in the, second, third round, wherever you want to pick a safety, and let him have to sit there and groom, behind Kevin Byard. So that's the only player that's left the team so far that I feel, it hurt. That's the only one that hurt. Everyone else is like, all right, thank you for your services. Good luck, moving forward with whatever team you are with now, and hopefully you can parlay that Nashawn Wright or whoever else is, Jaquan Brisker, who I was never a fan of in terms of how high he was drafted. Good luck with your new teams, and hopefully they can parlay those contracts into multi-year contracts for themselves moving forward. But none of those players, other than Byard, hurt at all for me.
Yeah. I think you said it perfectly. Byard's leadership on and off the field. Every time they were heading out on the field, he was the guy rallying the troops and getting them ready to go out there and play really well. And he led the NFL in takeaways, I believe. So I was a little surprised that, I was a little surprised they weren't able to bring him back. According to Josina Anderson, who was talking to Byard on the day he signed, it came down to really between the Bears and the Patriots, and he just chose the Patriots because of Mike Vrabel, like you said. I was a little surprised. I guess M. Lanera says Wright was statistically one of the worst corners in the NFL when it comes to coverage. I was a little surprised that he didn't get a bigger deal just because of the takeaways. But, yeah, a lot of times he was baiting guys or trying to bait quarterbacks into throws, and he was making awesome catches. I mean, we saw him making some one-handed grabs and stuff. And the takeaway when he stopped the tush push was a big-time takeaway as well. But the Bears drafted Zay Frazier last year, didn't really get a chance to see him on the field due to personal reasons. And I think maybe that was part of the reason why they just let Nahshon Wright leave via free agency. And then, like you said, Brisker, I liked Brisker, hard-hitting safety. He just couldn't stay healthy. That was his biggest issue, in my opinion. The concussions. I mean, he stayed healthy last year, but that's 1 year out of 4 where he was there the whole year and played all the downs. And again, he wasn't by no means the deep ball guy. He was more of an extra linebacker almost. And we had to get younger and faster on defense. And I think that was a big part of letting these guys leave as well. But according to Adam Schefter, Danny, we're broke, so we couldn't pay these guys if we wanted to.
Yes, I mean this is one of the things that really I am shocked that it just kind of caught fire the way it did, because I was watching that Schefter live and I understand what he said. The Bears the Bears have no money in terms of cap space, right? Not in terms of they have no money whatsoever.
Right.
You know, the McCaskies, I understand this is their business, this is their livelihood, and I know they're not the Jerry Joneses or the oil tycoons or Shad Khans with some of the other money they have on the side, but the Bears are not broke, guys. The Bears are $1 billion franchise. All right, only going to get better, more worth more once this stadium finally is built. So that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about the salary cap implication. So, but the Bears have not yet used one mechanism that they could, if they want to. It's at at their disposal. And we were talking about it earlier, AC, you and I.
Right.
They haven't restructured any contracts. And everyone's restructuring contracts, freeing up cap space, so on and so forth. But what you do when you do that is you just kind of kick that money down the road. And right now, as of today, next offseason, the Bears have around $60-some million or projected to have $60-some million in cap space next year. So if you restructure someone's contract and you kind of push it off till next year or a year after, you're kind of biting into some of that cap space moving forward. So the Bears are willing to do that, but they're willing to do it. And my theory, my belief is they're going to do it for a particular player or players, not just for anybody. They're not going to go out there and create cap space and push contracts down the road and go get a quiddy pay or get some of these other fringe free agents that the other teams are overpaying and to bring them in, because they might be serviceable players, but they're not going to get you over the top. I think they're saving that cap space or that mechanism, I should say, for a player or players that they feel can put them over the top, specifically on defense, right? So, just throw out there, because his name has been out there, like a Max Crosby, right? If for example, Ryan Poles admitted that they checked in on Max Crosby, they didn't say how far it got or anything like that. But if it is a case where they still have some interest in Max Crosby, and Crosby potentially could still be available, but they all want to wait until he's a little bit healthier, a little bit farther removed from his knee surgery, so he can pass a physical. That might be something where, all right, we've got a deal in place, and let's go ahead and let's go ahead and make this trade. Let's go ahead and open up cap space. I believe Montez Sweat is the one deal you can restructure. There's a couple other players you can restructure. You can open up, I believe, anywhere between $30 to $40 million worth of cap space. So that's what they haven't done yet. And so that's still in their pocket, right? So whether it's a Max Crosby or it's another player, because remember, we just went through a first initial wave of free agency. There's a second, a third, and a fourth wave of free agency. The other thing is, keep in mind, guys, the Bears and some of their scouts and some of their, their player personnel, they know what's going on around the league. People around the league they talk, and they have some stuff that you and I have never heard or we're not even aware of. There could be players that are currently on their teams that we think are safe and secure, that come the draft, if the team A drafts a player high up in the first, second round that can replace that player, you're bringing in a cheaper player, you're getting rid of a veteran, you can open up some cap space. That player that we never thought would be available could be available. And now the Bears can now pounce, whether it's, the player gets cut and they go and they pick them up via free agency, again, creating that cap space they need, or it can become available via the trade route. They could trade, pick them up either in the draft as a draft is happening, or they can get them after the draft as well. Right. So there's multiple ways, because the first wave of free agency, happened and the Bears didn't make big headlines. I think don't fret. Again, there's a couple more months here, not until when they hit in April, even when they hit June, right? I mean, when they get ready for training camp, I would not close the door on any possible veteran being signed or anything like that. The other thing is, there are a couple players out there that I have my eye on, and hopefully the Bears might have some interest in them as well. And that's Cam Jordan, 37-year-old defensive end from the Saints. Obviously, there's familiarity there with DA. 37 years old. He's not going to fit the younger, faster profile that they've been talking about. But 10.5 sacks last year for the Saints, right? Now there's talk about, he's just waiting to go back to New Orleans. That could be the case. Fine. Defensive tackle, DJ Reader is a guy who was with Cincinnati, was with Detroit last year. A guy, is a big, veteran guy, but a big run stuffing defensive tackle type of guy. So you're all going to see what happens through the draft, see what positions they fill, see if anybody comes loose in terms of veterans from other teams, whether via trade or free agency. And then we start kind of judging and seeing how this roster looks. But saying today on March 16th that the Bears are done adding because the first wave of free agency, they didn't sign anybody big. They didn't sign Trey Hendrickson. They didn't sign, or they didn't go get a Quiddy Pay, or they didn't go and trade for Max Crosby today. Doesn't mean they're not going to, continue to, update this roster and continue to, improve it where it's lacking. And the one thing I know about Ben Johnson, he said it multiple times. He's not sitting on last year or what happened last year. He is going to keep pushing the envelope, keep pushing the limit, and he's going to want to win, right? And obviously, if you look at the Bears roster now and compare it to what they have or what they're facing in their own division, you're going to say, man, there might be the third best roster in that division, right? So they know that, right? They're not going to sit there and just be like, okay, we're good. Let's see what happens. We had a great year last year. Let's see what happens this year. I believe that they're going to go out there. They're going to obviously they have a whole draft class to bring in, and then they're going to fill in the fringes on the outside, but yet also hopefully, right, unless they go get a big player like a Max Crosby or some other guy that we're not familiar is available, they're going to maintain that cap space for moving forward. And that the term that Ryan Poles continues to say is sustained success. That's what they're shooting for. You don't get sustained success by killing all your cap space in the future and going for it this year, right? Because that's what the Rams are doing. Rams are just killing their cap space, moving forward. The Cowboys are doing the same thing, killing their cap space moving forward because they're going for it for this year here. So we'll see what happens until they're in training camp in July. We'll see what the final roster looks like, but there's still plenty of time. The flashy names, they might be gone, but there's going to be names that come free that we're not aware of currently here today as of March 16th, that when the Bears get them, you're going to be like, oh, wow, I don't know if this guy was going to be available. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and again, the Bears aren't broke. They just have not. They're up against it on the cap.
Yeah.
Said it perfectly. They haven't restructured contracts. I think they're looking at, and I talked about this on Sunday. Coming up, we have Darnell Wright's contract coming up, and then we have Caleb Williams, and in that same time as Roma Dunze, they're in the same draft class. And then the very next year, you have Colson Loveland and Luther Burden's contracts coming up too. So they'll have to make
those are good problems, right? Those are good problems to have.
Right,
it means you're doing a good job of drafting, and you have young developing players that are getting good and are worth worth going and securing to long-term contracts. Now, obviously, they won't be able to resign all those guys, but I just feel like this narrative that just caught fire this week, that the Bears are broke and that they can't afford to sign a player because of this is insane, and it's just unfortunate that some people believe certain guys on TV and they think, oh, this guy, if he's saying it must be true. First of all, Schefter's his comments were taken out of context big time. Right. And whoever started the flame, and started saying that the Bears are cheap or are broke, obviously has no knowledge in terms of how the NFL works and how salary cap space is done and all that stuff. So we'll leave it at that. just for our listeners, I'm sure are very familiar with how everything works in the system. Bears are not broke. The Bears have the ability to go get players if they so choose so.
Well, M. Lanera is asking, why aren't they going for it is the question. Don't have much more time on a cheap quarterback deal. The thing is, last year they did try. They spent it in the wrong places. They paid Grady Jarrett more than he should have got, and they paid Dio Dangbo more than he should have got. So they were, and of course, Edmonds, and they had a lot of contracts on the books that last year that they've had to clean up. I feel like they thought they were going for it. And Jay Grizz is asking about Bradley Chubb and Jadeveon Clowney. Clowney usually signs, like you said, right at training camp. He doesn't want to go through the rigmarole of the training camps and all the dog days of the summer and all that kind of stuff. First of all, did you think Bradley Chubb would have been worthwhile to bring in? And secondly, what are your thoughts on Clowney?
So no, so Bradley Chubb, he signed with the Buffalo Bills. So they've switched to a 3-4 system. So he's going to be outside linebacker. So I don't think he was a fit for DA's scheme here. So that's what Bradley, and plus he's always a guy who's always been hurt, right? So, and then Clowney is a guy that really is, last year had a solid year with the Cowboys, but it's a guy that they could be out there if they strike out on in the draft in terms of being able to bring in any prospect that entices them and also. Maybe not pick up anybody in free agency. But the one thing I also want to go to the previous question there as well in terms of going for it. But I'll finish up on Clowney here, guys. The one thing that I feel like we're losing, touch on or faith in is Austin Booker. Why would you want to go get Jadeveon Clowney, who has pretty much been a okay player for a guy who came into the league with such hype? He hasn't been what he was hyped up to be, right? Other than 1 or 2 seasons here and there. But in Austin Booker, who's entering his 3rd year, right? Who we saw signs toward tail end of last year. He was one of the better pass rushers towards the tail end of last year. He ended up the season with only 4.5 sacks. He missed 8 games. It's a young guy, developing guy, right? He's a guy that can come in. I'm expecting him taking the leap there as well. And maybe the Bears are in the same situation, saying, "Hey, you know what? We got Booker here. Dayo's coming back from an injury." But we have faith in Austin Booker. He could be the guy that could go from 4.5 sacks to maybe a 8 or a 10 sack season. A full, complete, healthy season. Another off season of him in that in the offseason program, getting stronger, because that was a big thing with Austin. He was a redshirt sophomore coming out of Kansas. Okay, right. He started off his career at Minnesota. Rarely played for PJ Fleck. Transferred to Kansas, had a good year, 9 sacks, I believe it was, went to the Senior Bowl, declared for the draft, went to the Senior Bowl, really stuck out, but he was undersized. He was never developed. And now he's going into his 3rd season here, two off seasons in the Bears offseason training program. He's going to get bigger, he's going to get stronger. And last year, towards tail end of last year, he was a dangerous threat coming off the edge. So let's keep perspective there as well. Let's not kind of just say, all right, we'll get this new toy here in Max Crosby or Trey Hendrickson. Let's see what's going on here with the development of an Austin Booker. Yeah. Just one name I want you guys to remember. Let's not toss him aside. He's still a young guy, only 23 years old. The Bears might be looking at Austin Booker as that internal candidate that could be their next 10, 11 sack guy, right? So let's keep that, keep the faith there in Austin Booker as well. So now you can always, bring in more players. Probably the draft. Maybe there's, towards the end of this whole offseason, there's a veteran free agent still sitting out there, a great value, maybe like a Cam Jordan or something like that. I'm just throwing out names because his first name top of my head there, but let's keep an eye there. And internally, inside defensive tackle, that's where obviously Shamar Turner is a guy that they drafted last year in the 2nd round as a tackle. By the end of the year, before he got hurt, he was playing defensive end. So I think that kind of tells you where they see him moving forward, right? So defensive tackle for me is more of a priority, more of a need than edge right now because of the fact of Austin Booker and because of Shamar Turner and what how they're utilizing him last year. So that's why for me, like defensive tackle is a big key, a big area of need for the Bears. And I think if they stick at 25, that might be the pick in which, or the position group that they might go at 25. So it's a long-winded answer to say, they have some internal candidates. They're not done shopping. They're not done bringing in some more players. And I'll go back to the previous question in terms of, going for on a Caleb, on a rookie contract. I saw a stat where, there's a big misnomer that teams that have these rookies on these rookie contracts should go all in and go for it. And to a certain extent, I agree with that. But if you go back and research, only 2 quarterbacks teams have won Super Bowls with quarterbacks on the rookie contracts. One was Russell Wilson, and I believe the second one, and chat guys, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the second one was Patrick Mahomes. Again, just want to, but there's only 2 quarterbacks that actually have done it. So that, while it's a good theory, hey, let's go all in. Let's go get every single player and let's build up with a rookie quarterback. It's only worked twice in the entire history of the NFL, right? So, last year, the Rams were right there with the quarterback that they're playing. Was almost over $30-some million a year. So it can be done, right? It can be done in certain ways. You just have to draft and develop good players. Okay, you can't have draft classes that your entire draft class, 3 years later is either out of the league or not even on your roster, right? That can happen. So if you want to continue to build a winning program with a winning culture, draft young players that develop and become, good, great, or even superstar players for you. And then now you can fill in some free agents, veterans around them as well. So I think last year's class was a great start. Let's hopefully they put back, back-to-back good classes together. And now we got that core, that nucleus building here. And then we can start, picking and choosing some veterans to go around and kind of, fill in the blanks here and there.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm hoping we get a defensive draft the way we were able to attack the offense last draft. I've got one more free agent question, and then we'll dive into the center prospects. And this is more for me. Jedrick Wills signs with the Bears after a year off, and Jedrick Wills is a hometown kid to me. He played right here in Lexington, followed Damian Harris on that pipeline to play at Alabama, gets drafted in the top 10 by the Cleveland Browns and dealt with so many injuries. They kind of gave him a flyer deal. I think it's 1 year, $5 million. What are your thoughts on Jedrick Wills, and does he bring anything to the table?
Yeah, you mentioned it. A former top 10 pick out of Alabama. He's only 26 years old. He's 6'4", 312 pounds. And his unfortunate thing was injuries. He's never been able to stay healthy, right? Yeah. And that's what kind of plagued them with the Browns. So, and then he went. I don't know if you guys caught his introductory press conference. He went into details in terms of his injury last year, because he sat out all of last year to recoup they called it a knee injury. He had a torn meniscus. Right. So everyone's like, whoa, he's sitting out a whole year to recover from a torn meniscus. But it wasn't just a torn meniscus. He had his femur bone come off his hip. He had to reattach it to the hip. So I don't know if that was part of the injury or if that issue there, because I think he mentioned something in terms of it might have been born with something like a misalignment or something like that, and eventually just kind of wear and tear of football. So that was a huge injury, right? So that they repaired the knee. They fixed they reattached his femur to his hip. So he took a whole year off. And yeah, you're right. The Bears are taking a flyer on a former top 10 pick, still only 26 years old. And I think, we were talking about some of the depth in terms of, at guard. He's a guy that could play left tackle, left tackle for Cleveland. But if you need depth, you can always kick him inside, left guard or something like that as well. So it's a flyer to take. I think it's a gamble worth taking. They're not counting on him. They're not saying he's their starting, left tackle day one, right? So they're going to kind of throw him in there with a bunch with Braxton Jones, with Theo Benedict, with Karan Amagaji, and then Wills, and see which let the best man win. The one thing with left tackle, and I know everyone wants a stud left tackle, and I want a stud left tackle as well, that protects the blind side of Caleb Williams, but. The one thing we learned last year with Ben Johnson is he could scheme around a left tackle. He could scheme around. He can give him chip. He could protect. He can find ways to go ahead and kind of win with. Because remember, we had 3 or 4 different starters at left tackle last year between Ozzie and Theo Benedict and some of the other players, and Braxton early on in the season. So, I think as long as someone gives you good, solid play, it doesn't have to be spectacular. Doesn't have to be all pro play. But good, solid, consistent play, which I think Braxton Jones, if fully healthy, is capable of doing that, right? Will he get power rushed? Probably, right? And then a lot of things with Braxton was his core strength was never developed, right? And early on in his career, came in, coming out of a small, Division II school, we give him some time to develop. And obviously, unfortunately, he got injured 2 years ago. At the last game of the season in Green Bay, it was a gruesome. He broke his ankle basically, and he wasn't fully healthy last year. And I think just putting him up there, starting off early on in the season, he was going up there at 60-70%, in terms of his health, right? So give him a full season of off season in terms of getting stronger, getting healthier. Let's see what 100% Braxton Jones will do. Maybe he'll still get beaten. Maybe he'll still get power rushed, by a bull rush, in terms of on the outside and edge. But Ben Johnson now knows be able to scheme around them, protect them, whether it's a chip or help or whatnot. And I'm not worried about that because I think between Braxton Jones, Theo Bandit, and maybe even Jedrick Wills, I think we'll all find someone in there to kind of hold that spot until Ozzie Trapillo comes back the following season.
Awesome. Well, we got a couple of questions in the chat, but I kind of told them we'll hold off on that till the end of the show. Let's just hop right into this center position. You gave me your list, your top 5, so I'm going to flash it up right here.
Go ahead.
Your top 5 centers, number 1 is Sam Hecht out of Kansas State. Number 2 is Jake Slaughter out of Florida. Number 3 is Logan Jones out of Iowa. 4 is Connor Lew out of Auburn. And 5 is Matt Golban out of Michigan State. Take it away, Danny. What do you think?
Yeah, so as we talked about earlier, AC, that I was not expecting, as we kind of laid out the weeks of draft on tap in terms of the position groups we're gonna focus on. Center wasn't one of the position groups that you and I were talking about. Yeah. But with the Dahlman retirement, obviously they picked up Bradbury, but I think Bradbury's more of like a stopgap kind of a center for next year. I think they're gonna go and get someone in the draft and to be their future center. And we talked about, well, what does Ben Johnson like in a center? Well, he likes someone that's able to anchor, meaning if a bull rush comes in his face, he can at least be able to maintain himself between the quarterback and the defender that's rushing him. You also want someone that's athletic, being able to move laterally, maintain your blocks as you're moving laterally on those outside zone plays or inside zone plays. Also be able to elevate to the next level defender, whether it's a linebacker or a safety, and latch on and be able to seal and pin that second level linebacker and give your running backs a lane to get behind them and get down the field. So we're looking for athletic centers, guys that can move in space. While they're not big, lumbering, powerful guys, not necessarily guys that reset the line of scrimmage with power, these are more athletic guys that can move laterally and can elevate vertically and get to those next level defenders. And the top guy there is Sam Hecht. And you may have seen, there's a local report here that the Bears had a big contingent of scouts and personnel people down at Kansas State's pro day to watch, in my opinion, Sam Hecht. But this is a 2-year starter. For the Wildcats, had played 42 games, has 25 career starts at center. 2025 was an all Big 12 first team, voted by the league coaches, measuring at 6'4", 303 pounds with 31.58 arm length. Arm length for me with centers is not that big of a deal. Obviously, the longer the arm length, the better. But sub 33 or sub 32, I should say, arm length is not a big deal for centers, right? Moving forward. Right. So the one thing I talked about is athletic ability. Now he ran a 5.10 40, which is, I really don't look at that number. What I look at is the 1.73 10-yard split. And again, that comes into effect when he's asked to come out and pull. If they're running some sort of gap power scheme, that's asking when he's moving to the next level and reaching that second level linebacker. So that 1.73 fits that athletic ability that you're looking for in the center. So solid size, again, with an athletic frame, easy mover in space, uses his hands well to gain leverage, to control and wash defensive tackles off the picture, explodes out of his stance and easily gets around the edge to lead block and reach the edge defender on pulls. Okay, can chip and release to a second level defender with ease. Lateral agility to shuffle and slide while maintaining body control with defenders. Athletic enough where he can kick out and block the edge defender in pass protection. Lateral agility, he can set, shuffle, and mirror in pass protection. So some of the strengths there are things, and you can see right there, he's jetting down the football field looking to lead block. And that's the thing is, he's a guy that plays hard. You always see him running to the running back. You always picking the running back up off the ground. So, that kind of stuff that, really sticks out on the little things, right? They really stick out on tape, especially once the coaches get into this stuff and start watching this kid play. Now, they have more information than I do in terms of his character and all that stuff, but just watching this kid play on tape, watching the way he hustles, watching the way he goes and runs and picks up every running back that's off the ground, that tells me he's got high football character. I think this is a guy that the Bears are going to like a lot. Now, early on in the process, he was talked about like a fourth round pick, maybe even like a third round pick. I think he's moving up. I think a lot of teams that have a need at center, especially teams that run this, run the wide zone or zone scheme, predominant zone scheme, they're gonna have this guy earmarked. So if the Bears want to jump the gun and maybe if they like Sam Heck that much, that's why I've said maybe pick 60, right?
Yeah.
Might be something that they may earmark. If not, pick 89 could be available or prime spot for them to go ahead and pick a guy like Sam Heck.
I love that clip that you just talked about where he's getting all the way up the field. And I mean, he's like 10 yards behind the running back on that play, still looking for guys to hit. You got to love that out of your offensive line.
Coaches love that stuff. When coaches sit down and watch these prospects, remember, a lot of these coaches haven't seen these guys play at all, right? And when they put a clip on and they see that right away catches the coach's eye, especially like an offensive line coach or a head coach like a Ben Johnson, where that run game is important and that football character is huge. And, he doesn't touch anybody, but he's sprinting, how many 30, 40 yards on the field, doesn't block anybody, but it's that football, character. It's that want to, it's that competitive toughness where it shines on that type of a play because, he's going to get down there in case he has a chance at chipping somebody or just, bumping a defender and allowing his running back to maybe extend the play another 5, 10, 15 yards. Hell, maybe go for a touchdown. That's stuff that coaches love, and that's stuff that you see all over Sam Heck's tape there at Kansas State.
Yeah, there's all kinds of effort. The next guy is Jake Slaughter out of Florida. I'll put the tape on and let you talk, man.
Yeah, this guy's a little bit different. He's a bigger body center, right? So this guy for me is scheme versatile. This guy can play. He's athletic enough to be a zone center. He's also big and strong enough, in my opinion, to be a gap center. So this guy, multiple teams might be interested in a Jake Slaughter. But 6'5", 303, 32 and 3/8 arm length, 10-inch hands. Again, that 10-yard split for me is very, very important. 1.74 10-yard split, 32.5-inch vertical at 6'5", 303. That's impressive. That shows some of that lower body strength there. This guy was a highly recruited kid. He chose Florida over schools like Auburn, Arkansas, Missouri, and Florida State. 3-year starter at Florida. So he's got the experience. He's got 33 career starts, a 2-time All-SEC first-team member, right? A team captain in 2024. So he's got those leadership traits that you look for. And a 4-time academic SEC honor roll. So that tells me this kid's got a brain in his head as well. So he's a smart kid. Obviously touch on his positives are size and length, right? Efficient mover with short area quickness, as we touched on with his 1.74 10-yard split. Lateral agility, with the leg drive that can get defenders, on the retreat. Can strike and steer defenders, can get, out and pull comfortably in space. So going back to what I said initially, he's got the ability to do power stuff. He's got the ability to be athletic and do some inside zone, outside zone stuff as well. Athletic, can flip his hips in the gap and seal off any sort of backside pursuit from a defensive tackle. Can reach block those interior 3 techniques. That's huge for the kind of scheme that Ben Johnson runs, where he wants the centers to be athletic enough to be able to reach and block a 3 technique that, remember, it's typically lined up outside the shoulders of the guard. So you got to be able to move laterally and be quick and explode out of your snap. Slaughter has that. Solid pass pro, good awareness to look for work. What I mean by that is, he doesn't just sit there and say, all right, I have nobody to block, I'm just going to stand here and look pretty.
Right.
He looks and sees left or right. Is this guard in trouble? Does this guard need help? If he does, he goes chips and he knocks that guy out, off that block as well. So, this is a guy I think is getting more and more recognition as the process went on. That size and that kind of athletic ability. I think a lot of teams now are like, all right, this could be another guy that they can earmark. So for me, he came in at number 2 on my list. Just that ability to be able to scheme diverse, being able to do gap if you need to, and to be able to do wide zone as well. I think kind of puts him up, and then obviously the size, the length and all that stuff. I think that's something that kind of gave him a little leg up there over my third guy. But definitely a guy that I think is very, very intriguing. And either one of these guys, whether it's Hecht or Slaughter, actually, I think it's Slater. I think I'm mispronouncing your last name. It's Jake Slater. So, or is it Slaughter? You're SEC guy.
That's how Slaughter is spelled. So,
okay. All right. So maybe I wasn't right. Maybe I was right. All right. So I'll go with Slaughter. So we'll go there. But yeah, I think he's a guy that is a day 2 pick all day, right? Whether it's second or third round, that's the only question now. And I think if he's there at pick 89, I think the Bears run up to the podium and take him if one of the other guys that we're going to talk about here are not available.
Yeah. I mean, for a meatball fan like me, you get a jersey with the name Slaughter on the back and a big offensive lineman's number. I think he might sell a couple of jerseys too. So that's something to look for.
It's a slaughterhouse, right?
That's right. This next guy, I got to tell you, Danny, every time I see this dude, Logan Jones from Iowa, I'm kind of falling in love with the guy, man. Right. I'll be honest.
I mean, what's not to fall in love with a guy who was a consensus All-American and a Remington Trophy Award winner, which goes to the nation's top center, right? Again, Iowa is a factory, if you will, of offensive linemen. I'm sure if Tooch is listening, he's going to go ahead and vouch for that for me there. Logan Jones, talk about an athletic guy with some solid size, 6'3", 299. Shorter arms than the other two guys, are only 30 and 3/4. But again, that's not that big of a concern for me. Right. My big thing is athletic ability, right? He's 6'3", 299, had a 1.75 10-yard split, a 32-inch vertical, and a 9'2" broad jump. All right. In high school, he played both sides of the line of scrimmage. Actually, I'm sorry. In high school, played both sides of the line of scrimmage. It was defensive end, defensive tackle, and offensive tackle. He also lettered in track and basketball. Okay. So this guy is an athlete, right? Started at Iowa actually on defense. And we saw the last clip there where he's burying a guy, finishing his blocks on the sidelines. He's got that defensive lineman kind of mentality there to him, right? Switched to offense in 2022 and has started at center ever since. He's got 50 career starts at center, okay, a 4-year starter, a team captain, and he's got some nasty to him, right? We saw that clip right there. We might see it again here coming up where he finishes a guy on the sideline. So, again, good athlete, athletic frame, quick off the snap, moves like a tight end. Foot quickness and recovery speed allow him to be able to get back at a defender, even if he overruns him, right? Excellent hand placement to seal, twist, and turn defender. Keeps the feet moving on dual blocks to be able to create movement. Can get some guys, on their heels there in terms of defenders. Athletic enough to, if you ask him to pull and come around the edge and be a lead blocker for a back, he can do that as well. So it gives you some of that gap and some of that zone stuff that we talked about earlier. This guy, for me, it's tailor-made for a zone scheme because his ability to chip and release on those second-level linebackers is probably one, if not the best in the entire draft class. So, you might say, all right, if he's that good, why is he third on your list? Third on the list because size-wise, he's not there. He's under 300 pounds, shorter arms, but he's athletic as heck. So this is a guy you might get that pick 89 in the third round. You might get him in the fourth round. We'll see. But I mean, he's that's why he's physically, the traits aren't there with a couple of the other two guys, the first two guys we talked about. But the athletic ability is there. The tenacity is there. Remember, former defensive lineman. He's got that mental aspect of being a defender, to finish his blocks. And I love that about him. Athletic enough to get to a second level linebacker and be able to bury him, finish him, lock him up, steer him, all he needs to do. So, and again, comes from a great program in terms of developing offensive linemen out of Iowa. So I think, you rarely can go wrong with selecting Iowa players, right? So, and the fact that you kind of couple that with the athletic ability and then the meanness and the nastiness, that's why I love this kid. That's why he's third on my list.
Yeah, a couple of those clips that you had on tape there of him pulling and getting around the edge and getting that guy out of bounds. And then I put it up very first because I love that when he's just pushing that guy forward and absolutely buries that dude. Oh man, that's just
one clip. I could have given you 5 or 6, 7 more clips of him doing the same thing over and over again. And I'm talking about that mentality, that nastiness, the ability to finish. And again, for the most part, Iowa offensive linemen always hit at the next level. There have been one or two here or there that haven't been that successful, but with this athletic ability, with this tenacity and the ability to want to finish, team captain, again, I think this is a guy that will eventually down the road, be a starting center in the NFL.
Yeah. And our last two guys are kind of bigger dudes. The first one's Connor Lew, the junior out of Auburn. I'll throw the tape on and let you talk, man.
Yeah, Connor Lew. Connor Lew. This is the guy. He lettered in wrestling in high school, and they always talk about offensive linemen who have a wrestling background are typically terrific in terms of using their hands to gain leverage and be really good at the point of attack. And he's got that. 3-year starter for Auburn, another team captain. Okay, terrific size at 6'3.5", 310 with 32 and 3/8 inch arm length. 9-inch hand size, 31 reps. The reason why he's down this low on this list is because he tore his ACL in October of this past season. So, the ACL, we all know from the history, it's either 9 to a 12-month injury, right? And it's still, you're never really fully recovered, they say, until a year after that. So if you, and it might fit perfectly for the Bears, right? It might be a guy that you can come in, kind of red shirt, let him kind of sit there and kind of learn and be a backup, if you will, if he's ready to play. I'm not even sure if he'll be ready to play beginning of the season. That's why for Connor Lew, the medicals at the combine were huge. So depending on what this team saw in terms of recovery, when is he expected to be available, for center, if you're going to miss OTAs, that's where a lot of the stuff is inputted in terms of the offense and all that stuff. That's where you learn a lot of this stuff. So to miss that, I think it'll be huge for a center. So that's why, I think the Bears, if they do take a kid like Lew, it's with full expectation that he's probably going to sit out next year and just kind of redshirt, if you will, and learn behind Bradbury and some of the other guys. So he may or may not be available to contribute right away. And again, I don't have access to his medicals, so I just can go by what history tells me. And history tells me that if you tear your ACL in October, you're probably not going to be ready to play until October. Maybe it might be a couple months before that, right? So now you're hitting it up right up against the start of the season. Does that mean you missed OTAs? Does that mean you missed a big chunk of training camp? What happens? Did he put you on a PUP list where you missed the first 6 weeks of the season? A lot can happen with him, right? And that's the reason why he's low on my list here. But I love the fact that he's got the wrestling background. 3-year starter, team captain, 3-year starter in the SEC. That's huge, right? Yeah. The size I love as well. Strong hands, can latch on, twist and turn on nose tackle. Active hands, strikes quickly, and will continue to work and reset. Capable of be able to pull and sealing the edge defender as well. So he's a bigger guy, but he also gives you some of that scheme versatility where he can do some power stuff, and also athletic enough where he can do some of that wide zone and inside zone stuff as well that Ben Johnson likes. So this is a guy that, to me, if it wasn't for his injury, he'd be much higher up on my list because, again, gives you some of that versatility and some of that size and athletic ability as well. So that's the big thing we're now with Connor Lew, which I don't have access to, is his medicals. Is he going to be someone that's going to be redshirt the entire year? Could it be on PUP list to start off the season and then come on middle of the season? But then again, if you're a center and you miss the entire off season program, I get it. You're there, you're listening, you're learning, you're up on the whiteboard and all that stuff, but you don't get any active snaps or any active reps. I think that kind of puts you back a little bit. So that's why, it's unfortunate, but that's what we're dealing here with Connor Lew. But size, athletic ability, again, the wrestling background, and a team captain, a 3-year starter in the SEC. This is a kid that if you do get him day 3, if he drops that low because of the injury or because of the unknown or whatever, I think it's a steal. You put him on ice for a year, let him sit there and learn, and then next year he comes in and competes for a job.
Yeah, I didn't see a ton of the pulling on the tape that we had there, but I mean, if you're seeing it on the tape, I'm going to take your word for it. Did you answer this just now? What round do you see him going? Is he going to fall because of that injury?
It depends on the medicals, right? If he's cleared, if they say doctors say, hey, I think he'll be back in July, for example, and be able to clear for all activities, then I could see him going in round 3. But his talent, if it's just based off his talent and his tape, he's day 2 all day. Right, with that second round, third round, it's day 2 grade. Could he drop into day 3 because of some concerns over his knee? Maybe, but again, ACLs have become ordinary, if you will, or injuries here and there. It's just a matter of how is he responding? Where is he at in his rehab? When will he be available? If they say, hey, like I said, hey, he'll be available early spring, then you can go take him in the second and third round and have no regrets on him. But I think he's a guy that's that talented and that good and that steady. That I think he'll be able to come in and hopefully pick up and contribute as a rookie. But again, with the Bears, they're in a situation where they're a team that's ready to hopefully contend next year. They have a veteran there right now, right? They have no one behind the veteran. They have no one behind Bradbury. And if Bradbury, who's had an injury history in his past, if he goes down, and I know last year he played every single game last year for the Patriots, which is great. But in the past with Minnesota, he's had injury history. So you're going to need someone that's going to be available and ready to step in if you have no other option, right? So, but then this is where we talked about Luke Newman. Could you draft a kid like Connor Lew, knowing the talent, knowing the physical ability he's got, and kind of put him on IR, if you will, for a year, and have Luke Newman as your backup center if Bradbury goes down? These are all scenarios and options that the Bears could have. It just, we don't know how they feel about Newman at center if needed in a pinch, an emergency. And the other thing we don't know is Lou in terms of rehab and where his knees at in terms of this process right now. But obviously he didn't do any sort of on-field drills, won't work out because he hasn't been clear for that kind of stuff. He did do 31 reps on the bench at the combine. So we talked about some of that strength he's got. So, that goes there. But I do like this kid. I do like his prospects. I just don't know where he's at right now in terms of the injury.
And a true junior, so he's still pretty young. He's got age on his side. I don't know how Bears fans would feel about Ryan Poles drafting another.
That's the other thing, right? Yeah, another guy I can see that headlines right now: a damaged goods, second round, third round, whatever. And so that's but the kid is talented. The kid is good. Now, is he the ideal fit? Like say a Hecht or a Logan Jones or even a Slaughter is for me. It's it may not be. It might be more of a guy that you kind of look at and say, all right, I can see him do this, do that, and I can see him getting better. In terms of some of the outside reach zone stuff like that. So he's not as athletic laterally as some of the other guys are, but he does have enough where I think he can get by at the next level.
And the final center on your list is Matt Golban out of Michigan State. Tell me about him.
Yeah,
man.
Another Spartan, right? Talk about Luke Newman. That's where they went last year and got Luke Newman from Michigan State. Goldman, he actually started. He also played offense and defense in high school out of Connecticut, so he's got that defensive mentality as well. Played his first 4 seasons at Wake Forest, where he had 31 career games, 23 starts. And this is a guy who gives you a lot of flexibility. He started games for Wake Forest at left guard, right guard, center, right? Transferred to Michigan State last year, right? Started all 11 games at center before missing the season finale versus Maryland with an injury. Another guy that comes in as a transfer, year one, and is voted a team captain. That tells me what? Tells me he's got leadership qualities, right? That his teammates gravitate to him. They look for him as a leader there. They follow him, right? So, and graduated from Wake Forest actually in December of 2024 with a communications degree. So another one of these kids has got a brain in his head there. So solid weight and height for a center, 6'4", 305 is what he measured in at. Has that lower body power to drive defenders off their spots. Utilizes his hand placement and body lean to gain leverage on defenders. Works well with the offensive guard and inside zone to be able to wash out interior defensive tackles. Another one can elevate to the second level backer, and he can finish. And I emphasize the word finish because that's what you see on Matt Golban's tape is him finishing his blocks. There's one right there, finishing that block. Yeah. Love that. Love seeing that. Good strength to take on power and anchor, right? Keep shoulders square in pass pro, with defenders, shuffles and mirrors to stay attached. Good pass pro awareness. This guy picks up loops and stunts in any of those games up front that defensive linemen play. So, for a guy that's started games at guard, both left and right guard and at center, I think he's a guy that can come in here and while he may not have the prerequisite in terms of the overall athletic ability, he's not a slouch either in terms of athletic ability. So I think he could be a guy that can come in here and run those zone scheme plays and also, if needed, some power gap stuff as well. So I was looking for guys that were predominantly, I try to stay away from guys that are predominantly zone, right? Because even though they do run a lot of zone, they also run a lot of gap power stuff as well. And I know Ben Johnson doesn't want just one of these, just strictly wide zone guys. So that's why I found guys that could do a little bit of both, right? While the strength, like a Sam Hecht, might be athletic ability and moving laterally, might be zone, he also can do some power gap stuff, right? So Slater, I keep mispronouncing that guy's name. Slater is a guy that can do both, right? Golban can do both as well. Logan Jones can do some of that as well. So I was looking for guys that are athletic, that can do predominantly more of that zone stuff, but also give you some of that gap stuff, which we know Ben Johnson likes.
Yeah, I mean, that position versatility that you talk about can play both guard positions and the center position. NFL teams love that because you only got so many bodies you can keep, not only on your 53-man roster, but active on game day. Right. So that'll.
And Golban is a guy that I think you can get in day 3 of the draft, right? Whether we're on 4 or on 5. So you're probably gonna lose Ryan Bates, right? He was a guy who was veteran who gave you some of that position versatility inside, could play some center, could play guard. So if you do as a Bates, like, you can bring in a guy like Golban, again, day 3, could give you some of that position versatility inside. And like you said, you can only dress 53 guys, right? And the more positions you can play, especially along the offensive line. That's why I think with Jedrick Wills, like, I think, he's a guy that could make the roster as a backup left tackle or a backup interior guard as well. So that's why I see, that's a worthwhile flyer that the Bears took on Wills, coming in from Cleveland.
So do any or all of these guys remind you of what we had with Drew Dahlman or even Glasgow that Ben Johnson had in Detroit?
Well, for me, for Dahlman, it's got to be Logan Jones and Sam Heck. Those are the more athletic guys. If you're going to go Glasgow, you're probably looking more at the Slaughter kid and also Golbin and also Connor Liu as well. So those are more those part type guys that can do both power and zone. But for me, while Logan Jones does some decent power stuff, I think his athletic ability, the way he releases, the way he explodes out of his stance, gets to the next level linebacker. I think that's zone is probably going to be the team. If a team drafts Logan Jones, is going to be a team that runs either predominantly zone or does some of what the Bears do, a lot of zone and some power gap as well.
Yeah. Like I said, I've fallen in love with Logan Jones over here. I know you got him third on your list here. We'll go over it one last time. Sam Hecht is first out of Kansas State. And like you said, we had a large contingency at was it his pro day that they went to? That's what I saw. Yeah. And then we have Jake Slaughter second out of Florida. Logan Jones out of Iowa is third for you. Connor Liu out of Auburn is fourth. And Matt Golbin out of Michigan State rounds up your top five.
Yeah, and just for future reference, all these guys I just highlighted, I'm going to have their scouting reports posted on Shimon Draft Scout in the very near future. So if you are watching this live or on the delayed version, and you want to catch up on some of these, I'll get a more in-depth scouting report on each one of these prospects as we move forward on my YouTube page at Shimon Draft Scout.
All righty. Well, we'll just finish up here with a couple of questions. We didn't have a ton of questions out of the chat that we didn't cover live, like the Clowney questions and that kind of stuff. But M. Lanera asks, what do you think about Jordan Tyson if he's available at 25? I know you don't do mock drafts, but I saw a mock draft before we got on tonight where they had us taking Jordan Tyson, the wide receiver from Arizona State, at 25 and actually passing on a couple of offensive linemen, a couple of safeties, and TJ Parker, the edge rusher as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Jordan Tyson's a good player, more of that go up and get it kind of guy. Has dealt with a lot of injuries at Arizona State, but if the Bears use a first-round pick on a receiver when they still have the current holes they have on the defensive line, I would probably lose my shit, to be honest with you. I mean, you can draft a receiver. I mean, and I've said that they're looking for a dynamic speed receiver that they're probably going to get, maybe if not in this draft, like fourth, fifth round, whatever. They'll probably maybe see what's left in the veteran free agent pile there. But no, you cannot go with a receiver, which depending on how you look at it, right, could be a position of strength on this roster currently. I know you lost DJ Moore. I know he lost some of the other veterans they have behind him, but to me, it's not a receiver you need at 25. You need a defensive tackle or offensive tackle, or if you're going that way, or an edge guy. You just cannot, even though I don't pick safeties, I don't like safeties in the first round. Right. I would take a safety before I take a receiver. In that first round. Now, if a Mekhi Lemon drops to me at 25, talk about a guy who's tough as nails, who will knock your head off as a blocker, who can run some of that inside, in terms of like the slot. You got me, piquing my interest there. But no, defense. I've always said this from day one. Those who follow me all throughout the years know if your offense and defensive line suck, your team's going to suck, right? Yeah. Right now, the offensive line's got some holes in it. I don't think they suck. I think they're going to be okay. The defensive line has got tons of holes in it, guys, and. Yeah, I understand. Everyone wants to edge rush. I want defensive tackles. I want guys that can stop the run, that can collapse the pocket, because that's the fastest way you can put pressure on quarterbacks, right? The edge guys, they get all the money, they get all the fame, and they're very important. But a quarterback, if there's no pressure in his face, I don't care if you have, Terrell Suggs and Michael Stray on the outside. If he's got no pressure in his face, he can easily step up in the pocket, buy some time, get away from that outside rush, and make plays. So you need to have someone inside that can, this draft class doesn't provide you with a dominant three technique, right? It gives you guys that have glimpses and have some profiles of being rushers, but not that good against the run, or vice versa, being stout against the run and need to work on their pass rush. But for me, if you're going to go that way, I would go with the guy that can help get in there day one, help take on blocks, can help collapse the pocket, stuff the run game there for the opponent, and at least at the very least, take up blocks and allow my linebackers, my 4-4 ring linebacker Bush to go get, hit the hole and make tackles in the backfield, or DeMarco Jackson, or whoever else he has back there. So to me, the way this team is built right now, you got it. The first pick, if you stay at 25, it's got to be on a defensive line.
Yeah. And that's why we started Draft on Tap. The first two positions we went edge rusher and defensive tackle, because to us and to most Bears fans, I would say that is the part of the team that we need to attack is on the defensive line. You can go back and check that out right here on Barroom and Shim and Draft Scout on YouTube. We've got our the defensive tackles breakdown. I believe Caden McDonald was your number one, if I can remember correctly, just off the top of my head.
Yeah, Caden McDonald from Ohio State, and I'll have his scouting report posted here in the next couple of weeks on Shimon Draft Scout. But yeah, Caden McDonald and then Lee Hunter. Those are my two guys that on pick 25, if they're there, one of those two guys has to be the pick, in my opinion, right? Again, assuming the roster stays the way it is right now, right? If the Bears go tomorrow and sign a bunch of defensive players, we'll see what they sign. But that can always change. But as of today, with what they have currently on the defensive line and the holes they have, for me, I know everyone wants edge rusher, and I get it, and I would love Max Crosby as well, right? But if your defensive tackles cannot stop the run, and if you have no one in the middle to threaten that pocket or collapse the pocket, you're gonna be in world trouble. So I know Ben Johnson, I know Dennis Allen see that the same way, and I think they are going to follow up and do the same thing. So I am confident in this staff and this head coach that they see the holes that I see as well, and that a lot of people see, and they're going to go and attack it, whether hopefully with the draft and some veteran free agency as well.
Not to throw us too far off course, but while we're talking defensive tackles, a guy that I was really loving, amazing size and pretty good speed, Caleb Banks broke his foot. We knew he got injured at the combine, but we did not know how severe that was, and apparently it's a broken foot. You said it right here on our airwaves. He's the biggest boom or bust prospect that you saw as the defensive tackle position. Do you think that broken foot pushes him? I mean, is he undraftable to you? What are your thoughts?
No, he's not undraftable. Again, medicals will determine a lot, right? Assuming it's just a normal break, and if a break is ever normal, right? And then assuming that it's going to recover within the a lot of time frame. But for me, Caleb Banks was a guy that I was high on coming into the season, and it never happened. Now, there was an injury. He missed 3 games. I believe it must have been, I think it was a foot injury, if I'm not mistaken. And someone correct me if I'm wrong there. I wouldn't even touch him at 60. I wouldn't touch him at 60. I mean, I think that's how much of a boom or bust pick he is for me. You have picks the first 2 rounds, actually, hell, the first 3 rounds, you got to hit on them if you're the Bears. If you have no more additions on this team, you got to hit on your first 4 picks. Those are guys that are going to come in and contribute, whether they're starting or whether they're in the rotation or whether they're contributing on defense or a receiver or whatnot. And Caleb Banks for me is just too big of a bust. Now, if someone drafts him and he's a great player, then you know what? My hat's off to you. You guys took the gamble and you guys won. I myself, where this team is at right now and what they need right now inside, I just cannot put my stock in Caleb Banks, because and stuff that you hear in terms of talking to other people, that one thing I heard a couple times, I'm not saying this is pure gold, but Caleb Banks, does he love football? That's a question a lot of people ask, is he playing football because he's a big guy? So that's something you have to also think about as well. And obviously the injury that does nothing to do with it, right? That just happens. In football, people break bones and all that stuff. But, coming off an injury previously, only played 3 games this past season, when he was playing, just didn't see what I wanted to see there. There are flashes, sure. And that's what gets you excited in terms of his ability to, occupy blockers and, be able to, bend, invert offensive line backwards and kind of blow up a running play in the backfield. Sure, you love that stuff. But you never saw it consistently throughout his entire career. And that's what scares me. That's why he's a boomer bust. And then throw on top of it the injury aspect of it. For me, it's a big gamble for the Bears. You cannot miss with these first 4 picks, in my opinion. So that's why, to me, Caleb Banks, I wouldn't touch.
Howie R. Bears is bringing up B. Sizzy, age 20.
Brandon Sissy, cornerback out of South Carolina. Yeah, big, aggressive corner. DA loves those big guys that can reroute receivers at the line of scrimmage. We'll get into him as well. And in 2 weeks from today, our next draft on tap, I'm going to get into the safety class, and I'll touch on some corners as well. But corner is a position no one talks about. No one talks about. We talked about earlier losing Nahshon Wright and some other players from the secondary. Tyreek Stevenson. It's make or break this year. Do you want to go in with Tyreek Stevenson facing a make or break season? Terrell Smith's coming off an ACL. I love Terrell Smith, but he's never been able to stay healthy, right? And the other kid, Ja Frazier, I forgot, this kid ran a 4.39 40. This is a phenomenal athlete. Talk about another guy in the mold of Nahshon Wright, and so but still an unknown. So corner for me is a big need. We just saw what the Rams went on did this past week, right? Getting Trent McDuffie and then going signing Jalen Watson. Corner is a big need, and we're assuming Jalen Johnson's going to come back to be pre-injury Jalen Johnson, but there's no guarantees there either, guys. It's a core injury, and the way Jalen Johnson described it, that was a big time injury. And again, I'll talk about muscle being ripped off the bone. Whenever you hear that, I mean, that's big time stuff, right? And to assume someone's going to come back and be the same player he was prior to the injury, I pray and hope he is, but we can't until we see it, we can't assume that. So I'm assuming the Bears, obviously they have a better idea than I do because they see their medical records and all that stuff. And I hope Jalen Johnson is back to being Jalen Johnson of old, but say he is, right? So he is back to being old. What about the opposite? Do you trust Tyreek Stevenson? Can Terrell Smith stay healthy? We have nobody else. I mean, Ja Frazier is a guy, that young guy, undeveloped. He didn't play at all last year. So you got to fill some of those needs there as well. Kyler Gordon, for me, he's like, when he's on the field, he plays awesome, but he's never on the field. I believe he's a one full season, healthy season that he's played every single game. And someone in the chat, if you guys can look it up, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the thing about Kyler Gordon is like when he's on the field, yeah, you can utilize him. He's a weapon. And Dennis Allen knows how to use them. We just saw in those playoff games the way he utilizes them, and especially against the Rams and the Packers. But he's got to be on the field. So corner is a sneaky neat position for the Bears, whether they go get one from veteran free agency or they go pick one here in the draft. So at corner, we're going to talk about corners here. Obviously, we'll talk about safeties as well. I think that's a huge need, especially with Kevin Byard being gone. I do believe the Bears will draft one, maybe two safeties in this draft. It is a deep class, right? So you can get one in day 2, and you can also come back and kind of double up and get one in day 3 if you'd like. But we'll cover safeties in 2 weeks from today. We'll do in-depth dive into the safeties and touch a little bit on the corners as well.
Yeah, we're getting tons of people in the chat now. Slim Bo Boogie's bringing up a bunch of names. Isaiah World out of Oregon, he's got him as a sleeper pick at offensive tackle, and DJ Campbell from Texas for a guard.
Is that pick 239? You saying is he saying pick 239, which I believe is 7th round?
Seventh round.
7th round. I'll take a gamble on Isaiah World because he's got the physical traits you look for in a tackle, Slim. But he's been very disappointing. And another guy where the whispers are how much does he love football, because he should be better than what he's putting out on tape, right? And even Oregon, they're a little bit disappointed in terms of what he did. But yeah, I mean, if you're taking a flyer on it, and I don't have his measurables here in front of me, but I believe he's like 6'5", 6'6", and over 300 pounds with long arms, so athletic as heck. So Isaiah World was picked 7th round. Depending on what you're doing there at what you've done so far in the draft, it might be a good position to take a flyer on. Remember, the Bears, if they do trade down from 25, that's I think a topic I think a lot of people have asked me is like, do you trade down? It depends, right? It depends on how the draft is going. Also, What are you getting to trade down? To trade down just to trade down might not be worth it, especially if you're looking for a interior defensive tackle. Because for me, the tackle spot thins out, in the late 2nd and obviously 3rd round. So if you're going to take a defensive tackle, 1st round or early 2nd round is where you do it. So it all depends on what the run is on that position or whatever position group you're looking at. So, but if you do trade down, you could recoup some more picks, and you could take flyers on kids like Isaiah World. Yeah. All right.
We got one more final question. Best Meat Marinade is asking why the Bears cannot develop the defensive line. We've seen Dan Rochar be able to come in and revamp the offensive line and really fix those guys. We've seen receivers get better under Antoine Randall. running backs got better under Eric Bieniemy. What's the deal with the Bears not being, in your opinion, with the Bears not being able to develop our defensive line?
Honestly, I think they made bad picks. I think Gervon Dexter is a guy that's always kind of flash and shown promise, but he's never really put it all together, right? So that and obviously Zach Pickens was already being cut. A third round pick has been cut. We talked about last year's class in terms of Shamar Turner, and they drafted him as a tackle, kicked him out to end. I think that's probably where DA wants him to play most likely. So we'll see how that goes. He's coming off an ACL as well, so another one that's going to have to be some time to see how he develops there. But I talked about this guy earlier, and no one, and everyone seems to have forgotten about him. Austin Booker. They're developing Austin Booker, right? And everyone wants to go get Max Crosby or Trey Hendrickson or this guy and that guy. Austin Booker is developing, guys. And yeah, is it at the pace that we all want it to be? Is he a 12 sack guy? Not yet. But remember, it's his second year. He's going to his third year now. He missed 8 games last year. Okay, yeah. He missed 8 games. And when he came back, you felt him. You felt his presence. Yeah, sure, the sack numbers weren't there, probably, right? But you felt him making his presence felt. You felt him on the opposite side of Montez Sweat. And I think Austin Booker is a guy to keep an eye on. Don't give up on Austin Booker, guys. Do not give up on him, please. I love him to come out of the draft. I think he's been slowed down a little bit here in terms of the injury, but he's also developing. He's getting his body bigger. Got body stronger. I think he's a guy to keep an eye on this season to maybe hopefully take off. But he needs help, right? He can't be the only guy out there. Him and Sweat can't be the only guy out there. So that's why you need guys on the inside where there's big bodies that can just pure power and collapse the pocket and help those guys kind of win on the edge. Another thing that Dan Sandler loves to do, he loves running stunts and loops and games with those defensive linemen. And Booker's perfect with those. And if you get a nice, big, powerful defensive tackle, say a Lee Hunter or a Kanan McDonald, have him crash down on that tackle. Austin Booker uses his athletic ability, speed to loop back around, comes right straight up the middle. That generates pressure. That's how DA generates pressure. I'm not even talking about blitzing from the corners, from safeties or anything like linebackers, just running those stunts and games up front. Guys like Austin Booker, there's a guy we talked about prior to the show, Malachi Lawrence. Is a guy that we're going to touch on in future shows as well. Is another edge guy out of UCF, long, rangy, athletic kind of kid. Again, this class doesn't give you the perfect player at any position, right? But they could give you a guy like a Lawrence that could give you some of that athletic ability, like a Austin Booker, stuff like that, right? So for me, if they pick 25, it's got to be a defensive tackle. If those guys are gone, the next best for me would be a guy like Keldrick Falk, who I think is a 20-year-old developing young edge guy. Right now, better run defender than a pass rusher. And I think he's got all the tools. He's got all the physical traits you want in an edge defender for a DA system. And again, 20 years old, going to be 21 this season. He's a better run defender, guys, than a pass rusher right now. All it means is you just got to coach him up. You got to get that pass rush arsenal to be a little bit better, and you got to have a full-blown defensive end there, starting there. So Keldrick Falk, kid from Auburn. If the defense tackles are not there, is a guy to keep an eye on. I also love TJ Parker out of Clemson as well. And you can catch both those scouting reports up on my Shimon Draft Scout right now as we speak.
Absolutely. Again, I know you don't follow mock drafts, but I've been seeing Kendrick Falk not being in our range, at least in the mock draft.
I mean, I'm telling you, this kid, the more you watch him, and it doesn't surprise me because, again, another one of these guys, it was my Shimon top 5 edge players coming into the season, coming off a 7-sack season last year. I expect him to take the next step up. For whatever reason, Auburn was a mess this year, right? And obviously Hugh Freeze was fired, the coach was fired, and all that stuff. So we don't know what happened there, and that's where the scouts go to do these school visits, and they make these. They find out what's going on, what are some of the reasons why for different production. But you put on a tape, and you see the kid making plays. Now he's making plays in the run defense. You see him ability to kind of pierce and get skinning in between the blockers and make plays in the backfield. You see him when he's allowed to go and kind of run free and get after the quarterback. You see him, pressure the quarterback. Doesn't get there for a sack, but he provides pressure. So I love Keldrick Falk, and I love his physical attributes, and I love the promise he shows. Again, guys, just 20 years old, a guy that can develop here in your system. Those are the 4 names I just given you there in terms of who I like to see at 25. Again, if those guys are available, and if the Bears stick at 25.
Absolutely. All right. Well,
so don't give me Jordan Tyson anymore. I don't want to hear Jordan Tyson.
Okay.
Not first round.
Yeah. Slim Bo said he thinks they're going to go off. They may go offense in the first. I think they got to go defense.
Offense, curious. Offense, what? Offensive line? Offense, what position are you talking about offense?
He just said,
because I can see them going offensive line, like a Caden Proctor or Lamu from Caleb Lamu from Utah. A tackle could be out there. I can see them falling in love with that. I don't see them going. I don't see them going interior offensive lineman at pick 25, but I could be wrong, depending who falls. Spencer Fano was the kid out of Utah. Was a lot of guys, had him in the mock. You talk about the mock drafts. There's going top 5. Well, guess what? He measured at his arms are not tackle arms. So now he's going to get kicked inside the guard, and he's dropping. So, will he drop to 25? I don't know. But again, I don't see him as a tackle. I see him more as a guard. Some of him had him talk about playing center. So you go from being a starting right tackle. He's played left tackle and right tackle at Utah. Was playing right tackle this past year, and his teammate Caleb Lamu was playing left tackle. He's a guy that could be available at 25, a left tackle prospect. But also another guy that you have to deal with in terms of not the ideal physical traits and so on and so forth. So for me, I think for them to go offense, it's got to be a slam dunk guy that fell for some reason, whether it's injury history or something happened right before the draft. Who knows? But I just don't see them going offense unless it's a Caden Proctor at left tackle. But again, you've brought in some veterans on it to kind of fortify left tackle for at least a time being, because I do believe Ozzie Trapillo is their left tackle in the future. I do believe that. Yeah. And I know a lot of people don't believe that, but I do believe that. And I think the kid acquitted himself well for someone who was kind of thrown in there as like a last minute resort there. But yeah, so I think Ozzie Trapillo is their left tackle. I think they are going to just kind of bide their time this year, whether it's Braxton Jones or Jedrick Wells or Theo Benedict. I think so. That's why I don't think they're going to draft a left tackle. I think they would preferably get a center and build a defensive line and their front 7 with the draft. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, but offense, it's got to be a special player for me to forego a defensive player and pick him. And there's no one off the top of my head, guys. I can't think of an offensive player that would drop that far. That I'd be like, all right, let's bypass these guys and let's go get
Jeremiah Love. Let's get it going.
Oh, that's different. Ben Johnson would love Jeremiah Love, but he's not even coming out of the top 5.
He's not. Yeah.
So that's why the Chiefs went and signed Kenneth Walker, because they knew, because remember they were going to sit there and the Saints signed Travis Etienne, by the way. That's how it's pronounced. Etienne.
Yeah.
Because they knew, because those two teams were kind of jockeying initially for Jeremiah Love, but he blew it away. Yeah, Jeremiah Love is going, if not 3, he's going to 4. If not 4, he's not getting past John Harbaugh and the Giants at 5. I guarantee it.
Yeah, he definitely.
That would be a guy. That'd be an example of a guy that I would. All right, let's go get him. Go get him, because Ben Johnson. That's Ben Johnson's Jahmyr Gibbs. That's who that is.
Yeah. He's a great prospect. He killed it last year on the field, and then he's killed every step of the draft process since then. I heard him on Rich
people
Eisen.
Don't know. I don't know if people saw this on TV or not, but after he ran all the running back drills, they asked him to run receiver drills, and he ran receiver drills. So he's that type of a dual threat. He's a guy you can line up in a slot as a receiver on the outside. So and obviously a running back as well. So that's why teams absolutely, no pun intended, love Jeremiah Love.
Yeah, but he won't be there for us. It's a pipe dream. So you guys heard it here first. Danny said in a couple of weeks we'll come back. We'll talk about defensive backfield, corners, safeties, take questions from the chat again. Until then, like, comment, subscribe to the Ballroom Radio Network and to Shim and Draft Scout on YouTube. Hit the notification bell to tell you when we go live. But until next time, Danny, we'll just leave everybody with a bear down.